All right, g'day everyone. Welcome to another episode of Got the 4 Points. We had a week off last week. It was a pretty busy week for Pete and I, but we're back with you for another week of local footy action. And boy, is there a lot going on in local footy at the moment, Pete. There is finals on the horizon for quite a few leagues, several leagues wrapping up at the moment over the last 2 weeks, and several leagues that have still got a couple of weeks to go till finals. So it's all happening all around the place. There's been controversies. There's been more issues with the siren and with the final results. There've been players dropping their DACs left, right, and centre. There's been all sorts of shenanigans happening in local football, and we can't wait to bring it to you. How you been?
Yeah, been well, thanks, mate. We had an annual leave week last week. We couldn't find the time to fit an episode in, but as you mentioned, it's an exciting time for football. Um, I think the two, which I don't think will be too dissimilar from others, but the two periods I love of football is that early season. Rounds one and two, footy's back. You want to see what your season brings, and then these last 2 to 3 rounds before finals really exciting as well. It's where a lot of leagues, our league in particular, in the VAFA, you're looking at permutations, not only who can make finals, but what does relegation look like. For other leagues that don't have relegation, they probably are just looking at what that finals makeup looks like and who might be getting double chance or who might just be sneaking in. And I think there's plenty that's happened over the last 2 weeks that we've missed that have had some pretty big bearings on what's moving forward for a finals footy perspective. But it's an exciting time of the year, Rob.
Yeah, it certainly is. There's definitely been a lot of games with a lot of ramifications. It's been really awesome, like taking this show slightly more seriously and kind of looking closely through the leagues. We've got a couple of stories to cover about leagues where there's some pretty big disparities between the top and the bottom, but also really impressed to see quite a few leagues where the finals battle is really hot.
Mm.
There is several teams vying for those positions in the last couple of games of the season. So there's certainly been a lot happening. Now, make sure you check us out on Spotify or YouTube and Instagram. Keep sending us tips and interesting stuff that's going on. A reminder to fill us in on your local league's final situations. We're getting to the time of the year where we need to start understanding who's got a final five, who's got a final four, all of that stuff. Let us know, and feel free to send us any questions or stories. I think, Pete, we're going to go through pretty much a standard what caught our eye kind of segment today. We haven't got anything in the footy fire starters because honestly, we're just excited about getting towards the end of the season and all of those finals race permutations. So, why don't you kick us off? I think it looks like you've got an absolute cracking one first off here. What on earth is going on down at Colac?
Yeah, so we're actually going to Geelong Footy Netball League, albeit involving Colac. And Rob, we've got Siren Gate. Siren Gate is back. I say it's back. It probably hasn't been around, at least as far as I'm aware, since the St Kilda Freo game in the AFL down at Tasmania. But there has been an instance of Siren Gate in the Bell Park versus Colac game. Now, if you recall, very early on this season, we did talk about Bell Park versus Colac the first time they played, based off an off the ball, a very nasty off the ball hit that left a Bell Park player in hospital and saw a young Colac player spending 6 weeks on the sideline, with some sort of rumours that that was going to be investigated further, that Bell Park were going to ask for a review of that. Um, Following that, I think they actually missed the deadline, Bell Park, to do that further review. But there was a little bit of intrigue going into this game as to how it would be played out. There was an article leading up to the weekend where the Bell Park coach basically said, "We're going to go out, important game for us. We're just going to go out and win the game and play football, and that's what our focus is going to be on." But I think there was still a little bit of intrigue as to whether that was actually going to be the case. Um, As it is, the match is in the news anyway for a completely different reason, and that is Siren Gate. So players, coaches, umpires, fans left perplexed when the siren sounded. Get this, Rob, not for the first time, but for a second time in the final quarter at, and get this as well, as someone that's been involved in a lot of local footy, not a timeline you would often consider the siren being blown, but the 26th minute mark. The 26-minute mark, I think it's in all accuracy, I think it was about 25 minutes, 34 seconds that the
Wow.
siren has sounded for a second time. Just after Colac star, Jonathan Simpkin put the Tigers within 1 point. So Jonathan Simpkins just put Colac within 1 point. Um, Now there was a little bit of discussion as to whether the umpires get together to discuss whether Simpkins' kick had come off his boot before the siren, which they confirmed that it had. But there was absolute pandemonium because it was the second time the siren had also been sounded that quarter. When earlier in the quarter, at the 20:32 mark in the last quarter, so based off that, only 32 seconds of time on,
Wow.
the siren sounded, Rob. The siren went. They confirmed that that 20:32 was an error, that wasn't the siren shouldn't have been blown at that point, which isn't surprising when you consider that regular games of in this league as well are 20 minutes plus time on. But at the 26-minute mark, it left the umpiring crew asking, has there been another early siren blown? And the umpire did actually have to go up with the timekeeper's box and just confirm that that was accurate. And the coaches were saying that it was rather a spectacle to see the central umpire make his way up to the timekeeper's box to then make his way back down to the oval to put both hands up in the air and say, all clear, game is official, and Bell Park hold on by 1 point. So a bit crazy. I can only imagine that there's maybe, I'd say maybe in some internal reviews there at Bell Park and Colac of the timekeeping situation.
Mm-hmm.
Made a little more surprising, Rob, that 26-minute mark siren. I mean, clearly the 20:32 siren is an error.
Yeah.
That's obviously an error. Now, the 26-minute mark siren is one that's left people going, is it accurate or is that also an error? Now, get this, there was a blood rule. Now, blood rules sometimes can take a little bit of time, not always a long time, depends where the play occurred. But there was a report and a send off that they had to work through. There was also a lot of stoppages, is what both coaches sort of confirmed. So a lot of stoppages, a blood rule, and a report and send off. And you've played for an extra 5 minutes and 30 seconds, essentially, which
Mm.
leads me to think that maybe, maybe, just maybe, that wasn't conducted accurately. I'd be interested to see the report and the send off and how much time that did actually take and whether the sort of stopwatch was left on during that 1 to 2 minutes that was conducted or whether it was stopped during that, and maybe they just had a really quick quarter. It's not unheard of.
Mm.
You can have 25, 26-minute quarters, but I think we're traditionally used to a lot of local footy games going that 28 to 32-minute mark on average is probably what we're used to seeing. So look, as of today on a Sunday evening, there hasn't been an investigation or a report made by either Bell Park or Colac. Now, somehow I don't think Bell Park will be making a report given they snuck away with a 1 point win, but nothing's come through from Colac. So I think both teams have basically confirmed that if that's what the both timekeepers had, then that's what they had. But it is something that's pretty interesting that you don't see very often. Now, it has some finals implications there. Um, I'm pretty confident. I could really be wrong here, but I'm almost confident in saying that Geelong Footy Netball League's a top five. And I'm pretty confident that that now means that Bell Park are there sitting in fifth spot on 40 points, one game away from third and fourth in Colac, and St Mary's on 44 points. So, it could have been one of those classic 8 point games for Bell Park on the weekend. So really big win. Sounds like it was a really good game, given it was a 1 point scoreline. But also, I can only imagine the beers after the game would have been a lot of questions being asked. I can only imagine.
It definitely would have been a lot of questions being asked over post-match beers. Just had a look at the finals quarter action here. Bell Park kicked 1 goal 2, and Colac kicked 2 goals 3.
They're not huge
So
amounts of goals.
not a huge amount of scoring, and we do know in local footy when the ball gets booted way out into the car park or stuck in the trees or over a fence somewhere, that can definitely drag the time out in the quarter. So not much scoring maybe means yeah, 26 minutes is fair, but interesting. Very short quarter. Um, Quite an interesting pairing of games there between those two clubs with no shortage of controversy. And
Mm,
one can only imagine that if they do meet in the finals, it's going to be box office watching. Um, so yeah, good stuff there. Definitely finals ramifications. It would have put Colac to second, and it would have kept Bell Park out of the five if the game had gone the other way.
correct.
And yeah, I also wanted to say on that game, two of the great football jumpers in local footy in Victoria, two original non-AFL
Yep,
jerseys, Colac
agreed.
Tigers in a really nice yellow and black vertical stripe number with a logo on it, and Bell Park the classic green and white panels. I love that. Love seeing something a little bit different. So
Right.
no, good game to cover first up. Very intriguing. I'm going to go down to the VAFA. I'm going to give you two very quick ones, Pete, because I've got two kind of headliners here which caught a lot of people's attention throughout local footy. The first one in the VAFA was the Tomahawk rolling out for Old Melburnians in the Division 4 thirds competition, kicking 5 goals. Uh, in my estimation, and having seen some of the footage of the opponents he was playing on, with all respect, I'm kind of surprised he didn't kick 25 goals. Um, Little bit bizarre the way that ended up panning out. There was certainly a lot of rumours that Tomahawk was going to play for Old Melburnians at some stage this year, but with their senior side very much in contention still for the finals prior to that game, and given the scenario of him almost embarrassingly, I would say, rolling out for Div 4 thirds. Strange decision to play him in that game. That's something that we can maybe have a brief chat about. Nathan Jones, former Melbourne legend, also played in the VAFA on the weekend. He did play in the senior side for Old Peninsula. They probably didn't need him. They beat Elstonwick by 174 points, but Nathan Jones kicked 6 goals in that win. So well done, Old Peninsula, for finding room in the seniors for their recently retired AFL recruit. Old Melburnians, interesting. We can chat about that in a sec. Just briefly, I wanted to say on Ton Watch, we've had a lot of fun covering who has reached the 100 goals. We've been sweating on Mason McGarity for a little while. Yet another player in the Ellenbank League has reached the 100 goal mark for Nearham South, so well done, Mason. Lachlan Sharp has got there for Bridgewater. Lachlan Sharp, along with the whole Bridgewater team, has had a stunning last
Mm.
3 or 4 weeks, and he's managed to crack the ton. And Robbie Hare, there's a name that snuck up on us that I wasn't aware of before at Allansford in the Warrnambool District Football Netball League. Also got past the ton with an 8 goal haul, I believe, this week. So well done to those three players. But yeah, maybe your brief thoughts on the tomahawk, Pete. I think you've got some strong opinions.
Oh, I didn't like it, in all honesty. I just, which I know is a slightly different take to my take earlier this season when Fev was playing at Masala, which I thought was great. That is a club that's clearly struggled. He did play in their seniors, albeit their seniors are in the thirds division. They're not in the sort of Prem A to Div 3 of the VAFA, but I didn't super like the Tomahawk one. You know what, 6 to 8 months out of the AFL, playing thirds, I think, is bad enough when you learn which I thought was really bad. I thought playing thirds was really bad, thinking it was thirds Premier Division, and then when I learned it was Div 4 of the thirds, I thought, that's just that little bit worse. And then seeing a little bit of the footage of some of the guys he was up against there for Mazenod, I was just like, not sure I super like that. I think it makes again, we've got that attachment to the VAFA, but it makes for mine the VAFA look like a bit of a laughing stock in all honesty. And in all honesty, if I was Mazenod, I would be fuming because essentially VAFA have made my club into a laughing stock
Mm.
through Tomahawk coming back in that level. So I'd be fuming. I think I said to you that for me it would have been there was a 9:20 game. It would have been a 9:18 a.m. forfeit. With pre-planned from our club's perspective, we would have been at the cafe having breakfast together before leading into a bit of a pub crawl as the last game of the season. And we would have called up at 9:18 and said, sorry, Tomahawk won't be playing today because we're not turning up. So that would have been my take, but yeah, I wasn't super keen on it.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm with you. All right. Where are you going next? Southeast?
Well, I'm going to go to the Mornington Peninsula Football Netball League. And, Rob, sometimes if you're not happy with something, like I wasn't happy with Tomahawk, you've just got to do something about it. Now, there's varying ways you can do something about it. And I'm about to go through a way that I haven't necessarily seen in my time in football. I don't know whether you will have seen it, but let's talk through it. So, we're going to Crib Point versus Pines, Rob, in the Division 3 Women's Preliminary Final. And basically, what's happened is a Crib Point player has been handed a red card for striking a Pines player. We've seen that plenty of times. That's nothing too unusual. We've seen hits late. Then, interestingly, obviously not super satisfied with what's just occurred, the Crib Point player has dropped her shorts and mooned the Pines coaching box. Just giving them the old brown eye, the full moon. Just said, have
It
a bit
was a
of,
full moon this weekend too.
just have a bit of this. And look, the Pines coach did confirm that there was a little bit of shock in the coaching box. They weren't really sure what response to have to just copping a full moon from the Crib Point player. Um, and yeah, obviously, the other part of it is Crib Point has won the preliminary final, so Crib Point have gotten through. They'll go through to a grand final this weekend. Uh, Unconfirmed at this point whether that Crib Point player has been suspended either A for the striking, B for the mooning, or C for both. Um, if you'd like to submit your answers, you can do so onto our Instagram. A for strike, B for moon, or C for both, and I don't know. We'll see if we can try and get an update on what's happened with the Crib Point mooning incident. I just thought, Rob, I've seen a lot of players voice their displeasure at times on the football field to umpires or to opposition players. But I must admit, the mooning of opposition players and opposition coaching is a new one for me, and one that we might just need to have a quiet word with a few at the club and just see if we can weave into a black season at some point when we're dissatisfied with what's occurred.
It's so bizarre. And yeah, well found that story. That's absolutely extraordinary. I don't really know what to say. I guess I guess if they only fine this player for striking, then we can suggest the league is over the moon. But yeah, look, that's bizarre. What a way to miss a grand final that would be. But also, I don't really understand from the limited information we have about this story why she was mooning the opposition coaches and not the umpire. That seems a little bit odd.
I
But
could only assume, Rob, the opposition coach was giving a little bit of cheek.
mm, there we go. Very good. And she decided to give a bit of cheek back. I guess I get it. Very good. Oh boy, that's there's a lot going on. Apparently there was a lot to unpack. Um, anyway, we'll leave that one where it is. All happening. I I don't think I really do want to see the Uni Blacks players take that one on board
That's a
actually.
fair
But
point.
yeah, we don't need any unnecessary suspensions for mooning. Um, but anyway, wow. There we go. We've kind of heard it all here on Got the 4 Points. While we regain our composure, we're going to head back to the Goulburn Valley. Wait, well, not head back. We're going to head over to the Goulburn Valley Football Netball League. Now, I did mention in our last episode, Pete, that we hadn't actually spent too much time talking about the Goulburn Valley League, perhaps in favour of the league up the road that we love, and we talk about it in every episode. But Kyabram had been having a wonderful season up there in the GVFL, but they lost their first game of the season on the weekend in a 1 point classic to Mansfield. Pete, this sounds like one of the best games of the
Mm,
year to me in any division anywhere. 1 point classic, 16-7 103 to 16-6 102.
what a great game.
What a game of football that is. Kicking 4 goals for the winners were both Ben Christopher and Will Hogan. Kicking 5 goals for Kai was Charlie Bennett, and Tom Holman kicked 4 goals as well. So this game sounds like it must have had everything. It would have had fast passages of play. It's had straight kicking. It's had bags of goals from multiple players at both ends of the field. Really on for young and old. It's not really a nail in the coffin at all for Kyabram. The Bombers are still 2 games clear on top of the ladder, but the win is very handy for Mansfield, consolidating them in fourth spot. They are now 2 games clear of the fifth placed Shep Bears. But where we were saying in the last episode that Kai were kind of home and hosed a bit, looking sort of clear and off to the races in
Mm.
the GVFL. Maybe now there's a little bit of an indicator that Kyabram are beatable for the rest of the competition. Probably just opens up that premiership race for the whole top five. Now that the fourth place team has managed to knock off the undefeated Bombers. So well done Mansfield and well done GVFL for turning on a cracker of a game. Wish I'd been there.
Yeah, it sounds like it was probably not just maybe the best for like sounds like it was the best game of the week this weekend for local footy, but with that scoring and great kicking too, 16-7
Yeah.
to 16-6. Sounds like it may have been a candidate for one of the best games of the whole season across
Yep.
local footy. Because that sounds really great. No, agree, Rob. It's the classic Alistair Clarkson comment around if it bleeds, you can kill it, and that was his big thing around Geelong when Hawthorn got up unexpectedly in that first grand final. So maybe that's other teams in that league going, Kyabram can actually lose, and we're actually a chance. So really good pick up there. And certainly a league that's got some really good football in it too. I know we focus a lot on its big brother up the road, but a really, really good league. I'm going to take us, Rob, to another slightly interesting one. Something else I hadn't seen too often in my time, if ever again. Taking us to the Ballarat Women's Football Netball League. Bacchus Marsh had won last weekend's qualifying final against local rivals Darley to earn a shot at minor Premier Redan for a place in the grand final. Big day, you're potentially playing for a spot in the grand final. they withdrew itself from the finals series after citing a lack of players. Now, when I first read this, I thought, oh, that's pretty dire to be in a sort of prelim final and have a lack of players. Comes to that the Cobras under 19 youth girls side are also playing in a final series, and they've got multiple players that play across both grades. So really needed to make the decision of where they were going to put their energies and efforts. And so have actually decided to pull out there of the seniors to focus in on their under 19s youth girls team. So what was meant to be a first semi-final between Darley and East Point will now actually become the preliminary final, with Redan going straight through to the grand final. So Redan will get the bye straight in, and Darley and East Point will now go instead of a semi-final to see who would play the loser of what was meant to be Redan and Bacchus Marsh. They will go into the prelim to see who goes up against Redan. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting one. I know you and I saw that headline yesterday of team forfeit semi-final, and we're both pretty intrigued to see who it was. Yeah, it turns out it is the Bacchus Marsh ladies team, and it turns out they might just be a little bit too good in that they've got the team in the under 19s and the seniors into the finals, and unfortunately a lot of double ups there, and obviously didn't feel like they could compete, or maybe scheduled at the same time. I must admit I don't have any information as to why they couldn't play two in a row. I'm guessing they maybe just thought, given it was finals, it's probably a stretch to ask players to have to play in two finals games. That could be quite challenging. So, yeah, quite an interesting one there from the Ballarat Women's Football Netball League.
Well, if it's a scheduling issue, that's an absolute travesty, and
I
that should
can't
be
imagine it
sorted
would
out.
be, but
Yeah.
it really would depend. I suppose I'm showing my limited lack of knowledge here, but whether, because I just know some women's 19s don't play in the same league, or
Mm,
what I should say is that there aren't as many under 19s women's teams at the minute, so they combine across a couple of close leagues to
yeah.
have that. I know that they do that currently in across sort of the central Goldfields Bendigo area, where
Yeah.
you've got Castlemaine playing North Bendigo and Bendigo Thunder, teams like that that aren't in the Bendigo Football League as Castlemaine
Mm.
are in the women's in the sorry the seniors. So yeah, I wonder whether it could be that, or whether it is just the fact that they are sort of schedule. Sorry, if they are just worried about players having to play multiple games.
Well, the other thing that then occurred to me is that if they knew ahead of time that both teams were going to be in the finals and that this might become an issue, why did they play in the first final and not allow another team to participate in the finals? That seemed a little bit strange to me. And I guess that team is Dali. Yeah, they probably, no, but they could have pulled out and let the sixth place team or whatever it is at the final five, or,
Hmm.
yeah. Would have been interesting to know at what point the decisions were made. Maybe there were injuries and so forth that cropped up along the way as well. But yeah, it's strange to see a
Potentially.
team forfeiting a final. But
Hmm.
I guess also I have some sympathy and some admiration for prioritizing the junior program there for the development of the game and for the
Yep.
development of that club into the future. They've
Agreed.
made a decision there that
Yeah, and
the
I should
future of the club is perhaps in better hands if they can secure an under 19s premiership.
Yep, and I should add that Bacchus Marsh under 19s youth girls team are on top of the ladder, undefeated. So,
Yeah,
and did win quite convincingly in their final to get to the grand final. So
yeah,
they are in a grand final. So I think you can imagine that when you have had an undefeated season, their women's team, senior team, was third on the ladder, which is still pretty good.
mm,
But I can imagine when you've got one of your teams that's undefeated, and looking a good chance for a premiership, you probably want to make sure that you don't toy with that
Yeah.
and give yourself the best chance. So agreed. I think it's great that they're putting focus on that junior program where we can understand a lot of clubs might potentially go the other way and put focus on the senior program
Mm,
because it is seen as the more elite end of the local footy spectrum.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm going to go down to the Hampden League. Now, we have talked a little bit about the Hampden League in recent weeks, but things are getting pretty interesting down there in the southwest. I saw this week that seventh placed Camperdown drew with the second placed reigning premiers South Warrnambool. So that's a fantastic effort by Camperdown. This is a league, in my estimation, and I've said this before, that is rivaling the Ovens and Murray for the closest and most interesting league in Victoria, other than perhaps than Premier B and the VAFA, which is also really fantastic. Although it's kind of sorting itself out a little bit now. We'll
Mm,
come to that later. But seventh place Camperdown being able to draw with second place South Warrnambool is a really great effort by the Camperdown Magpies. South Warrnambool have dropped to third on the table now. It sounded like another absolute cracking game. It was pretty impressive start by Camperdown. They got out by 3 or 4 goals, I think, in the first half, before 3 goals to none by the Roosters got them in front at three-quarter time by 4 points. So a very solid comeback there by South Warrnambool to get back in the game. It wasn't to be, however, and Camperdown ended up getting the win. Now the final score was 9-4-58 versus 8-10-58. So South Warrnambool a little more inaccurate there. And we all know the bad kicking is bad football phrase. South Warrnambool probably kicking themselves after that, after those missed chances. But impressive there from Camperdown. Um, there was plenty of other hot action in the Hampden League over the weekend, though, too. Portland lost to Warrnambool Blues by 5 points, so another very good game on offer there down at Portland.
yeah.
Portland have had the big turnaround. They're looking to go from bottom place last season to finals, and they've been inside the top five all season. Well, they still are, but they're in fifth now and even on wins with sixth place Terang Mortlake. So 8 wins apiece there for Terang Mortlake and
Mm.
Portland. Portland play Camperdown this weekend, Pete. So Camperdown several places lower on the ladder, still in seventh. But as we've seen from that draw with South Warrnambool, they are not to be taken lightly. And I wonder if there's a few people at Portland getting a little bit nervous about whether they might miss out on that fairy tale of going from bottom of the ladder to the final five come season's end. A couple of weeks still left in
Mm.
that league, so plenty still to play out. But yeah, Portland's got Camperdown in a must-win game,
Yeah.
especially because Terang Mortlake, who are fighting for that fifth place spot, have a game that they're very much expected to win against one of the lower sides on the ladder in Port Fairy. So good stuff down there in the Hampden League. I'm keeping an eye across that pretty closely.
Yeah, definitely. And even that Terang Mortlake Port Fairy game, like I think this league has shown that that's not one they can take lightly and bank the 4 points.
Hmm.
I mean, Port Fairy have had 5 wins this season, so they're not without their chances as well of causing an upset. Huge win for Warrnambool against Portland. Looking at the ladder, if Warrnambool had not won that, they would be the team sitting in fifth instead of Portland.
Yeah.
So they're currently sitting second off the back of that win. If they hadn't have won that, they would have been in slightly more trouble than what they are now. So big win for them. I do hope Portland can make it. We've covered them a few times this season, and I think they would richly deserve that. But football doesn't give it out just because you richly deserve it. It's got to be earned. So
Yeah.
it will be interesting to see how that goes. I was thinking, Rob, one of the things we'll have to do, and I'll try and make a commitment to do this, is develop a ladder predictor for some of these close leagues. So Ovens and Murray, I think the Hampton Premier B, and then I might send that to you, and we'll both have our crack at what we think might be the final results there across those leagues and any others that are close that we might want to have a little crack at. Rob, I am going to take us just a little bit closer into Melbourne, from the Hampton Footy League into the Ballerine Football Netball League. And I wanted to touch on this one because it comes back to something you mentioned very early on in this season's episodes, which was the promotion relegation system there in between the Geelong Football Netball League and the Ballerine Football Netball League. So quite a different promotion relegation system than we are used to, but one that is really between two leagues, essentially separate leagues, albeit both of them are administered by AFL Barwon. Um, but it isn't just as simple as whoever finishes bottom of that league moves up, and then whoever moves down, and whoever finishes top of the other league moves up. It is a point system based off from memory where each of your team finishes across, I believe, was it all grades from memory, Rob, or was it just your senior men, senior netball now?
I believe it's just senior men and A grade netball.
Yeah, yeah. So senior men, A grade netball. I'm confident in saying that North Shore are the team that are in trouble. If any of the Ballerine Football Netball League teams want to go up, I should say the top two. If any of the top two want to go up, that is all it is offered to. Well, on the basis of the point system, Rob, the team that is absolutely on top of the championship ladder, and so this is very different. We're not necessarily talking on top of the ladder this season. We're talking the championship ladder, which I believe is the culmination of a couple of seasons. Um, Geelong Amos are well and truly on top of that championship ladder, but have already come out and made statement that they will remain in the Ballerine League next season, and they will pass up the opportunity for promotion to Geelong. Now, they have cited that the reason for that is the health of the Ballerine Football Netball League. They feel like the Geelong Football Netball League is a little bit lopsided, which is interesting, but not unsurprising given
Mm,
what we've
with
spoken about
justification.
with North Shore and Lara. So not too surprising there. Their geographical point of difference in the Ballerine Football Netball League, they believe that offers them a real point of difference in that league than what the Geelong League would offer them. Um, and the bid for the Ballerine Football Netball League to become a Premier League, which I thought was interesting. Maybe not all things rosy between the Ballerine Football Netball League and the Geelong League. And I'm wondering if that's almost a push of the Ballerine League to say, let's not take this promotion, let's stick together as a league, and let's see if we can maybe rival the Geelong Footy League and become just as strong and dominant as that league in terms of being a destination place for players. So what that does mean is that Torquay, who sits second in that championship ladder, will be offered the option to join the Geelong League in 2026, with, as I mentioned, the North Shore team in the Geelong Footy League being in that relegation zone. Now, there's no word from Torquay yet as to what their intentions might be on that front, but it is very much a watch this space story. I just thought it was interesting that yeah, there feels like there's this push from at least Geelong Amos in the Ballerine League to not join because they feel like they are somewhat rivaling the Geelong Footy League in terms of standard and quality. Yeah, what are your takes on that?
Yeah, very interesting. I would have thought if you'd given me a blind choice of whether it would be Geelong Amos or Torquay that would prefer to go into the Geelong League, I would have said Geelong Amos ahead
Mm,
of Torquay. You can imagine that Torquay might be really reluctant
Yep.
because there are some pretty big rivalries. And if we're talking about local football clubs with gate takings revenue and canteen revenue, the games between Torquay and Anglesey, Torquay and Barwon Heads, Torquay and Ocean Grove in the Bellarine League, even Torquay and Queenscliff, these are teams that are not very far apart and they're going to draw big crowds for big rivalries. I'd be pretty surprised if Torquay want to move.
Mm.
And so
Oh,
you might be right that it's going to be a no thank you from all of the Bellarine clubs and an indicator that they prefer to stick together. I don't mind that. I think it's good thinking by AFL Bowen to offer that choice, but I think it's good thinking more from the point of view of trying to help out the struggling clubs in the Geelong League rather than helping out the top teams in the Bellarine League. And the other thing that's interesting is that the Geelong and District Football Netball League is not included in this.
mm.
So there is a third league in that region, which I believe is not administered by AFL Barwon,
No.
but is in the same area. And it would be really interesting to see whether a club like North Shore or Lara might consider joining those leagues, or joining the Bellarine or joining the Geelong District, given how bad things are going. But I think that we would have already heard about that if that was going to happen because the league transfer things would have had to been in by the end of June. So, um, yep, those clubs probably not going anywhere, but very interesting to hear that Geelong Ammos have turned it down.
Mm.
Particularly interested around their thought of having a geographical point of difference. So they feel like they can recruit Geelong-based players
Yep.
to their club better by being a Geelong-based club in the Bellarine League than
Then,
recruiting other Geelong players if they're in the Geelong League. Very
yeah.
interesting. Fair play
Agreed.
to them. They've obviously thought it through and come to a decision. So
Yep.
fair enough. All right, I'm going to go to Central Murray, another one that we've talked about a little bit. Not going to talk about the league restructuring here. I just want to focus on the games. There've been some really interesting things happening up there in the Central Murray League on the football field. The first one that caught my eye was a 4-point win for the Kahuna Kangas over the Mallee Eagles. So that was a big clash of
Big win.
two finals contenders. Final margin there, 7-9, 51 plays 6-11, 47. So Mallee Eagles, in this case, the team that were more inaccurate and ended up going down there by 4 points. So that win takes Kahuna from third to second and drops the Eagles from second to third. So a direct swap there within the top five of the Central Murray League. And another game of consequence that I saw up there was that the Kundruk Barham River Raiders, what a name, uh, and a great logo. If you haven't seen the River Raiders logo, it's worth having a little Google image search for that. Um, yeah, so anyway, the Kundruk Barham River Raiders started the weekend in sixth place, but lost to Lake Boga, who are seventh. Lake Boga were 3 games behind Kundruk Barham at that point. And the River Raiders are in a very tight tussle with one of your paddock to premiership picks, Pete, Tulibuck Manangatang.
Yep.
So Tulibuck Manangatang play Kundruk Barham this weekend. That is now a game of huge significance because Kundruk Barham were looking reasonably settled, or
Mm.
at least a reasonably good chance, if not settled, in terms of a final spot. And just like we talked about with Portland, this is another team that is looking to go from bottom of the ladder into finals. So, in fact, they finished bottom of the ladder in 2023 with 0 wins and bottom of the ladder in 2024 with only 1 win. So, Kundruk Barham have been looking the goods to play finals, and now it's really on with Tulibuck Manangatang for that finals spot. It's all happening.
It is. Yeah, I was looking at that, of course, for my paddock to Premiership, and I noticed that this weekend's game for Tuli Buckmanangatang and Kundruk Baram is going to be huge.
Hmm.
You would almost think that the winner of that probably gets the final spot. Potentially, there's still a bit that could play out there, but yeah, it's one that both teams really need to win. Probably Buck needs to win a bit more than Kundruk Baram, given that Kundruk do have, I believe, Swan Hill in the last round, who are sort
Exactly.
of dead bottom.
Yeah.
But still, you don't want to be going into the last round needing to win to get into finals, and probably having to win by some margin too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how the last 2 week plays out there in the Central Murray. I'm going, Rob, to my final what caught my eye. And it's been a bit of a mixed bag for what caught my eye this week because I'm coming up with all types of weird ones. And another one here in the Omeo District Football Netball League, the final round match between Bruthen and Swan Reach in the Omeo District League was abandoned 2 days before the game was due to be played. Now, League President Ray Gallagher confirmed a community issue had arisen in the East Gippsland area, and the six-team league was not prepared to risk the safety of spectators at the match scheduled to be played at Bruthen on Saturday, and so it was abandoned. Now, the other two matches went ahead, and this has had big implications on finals, with Buchan bumping Bruthen from finals in the final round of the league with an upset win against Swifts Creek by 15 points on Saturday. So I did see a statement from Bruthen that indicated that they understood that across all both teams, Bruthen and Swan Reach, that there was potentially teams that were going to miss out on finals potentially off the basis of abandoning the match. I just wonder whether Bruthen thought that that was potentially going to be them in the seniors, given that Buchan probably weren't expected to beat Swifts Creek, but have pulled off the upset and done so to put themselves into finals in that league. So really interesting. Look, not sure at all what the community issue was, but certainly would put that faith in the clubs and the decision makers there at the leagues to make a decision that obviously was best for the community. But interesting, just similar to the Bacchus Marsh forfeit of the semi final. Don't often see too many matches abandoned before being played. And so, yeah, we'll come to see what Buchan can make of that lifeline, having now snuck into finals, and what they can do in that final series in Omeo.
Well, I'm wondering whether Buchan have orchestrated the community issue.
That's uh, we take. I'm not with this man, Buchan. If Buchan are
No,
coming
no.
after anyone, come after that man.
I just said I wonder. I have no information, and it's very tongue in cheek. I'm sure it was probably a serious issue, and we hope everybody is okay up there. But no, in tongue in cheek, it would be interesting if I don't know, Buchan had managed to flood the field or something there at Bruthen in order.
Well, look, I've seen sometimes in cricket they go out and
Yeah,
burn the pitch before
or water the
before a big
pitch.
day, or
Yeah.
water it at the same time. So yeah, anyway, it's yeah, it'll be an interesting one to see what Buchan do with that opportunity, Rob. Can they go on to maybe make the most of it?
Well, it would be an amazing story if they did manage to go on and win a couple of finals and get themselves into a grand final. There we go. It's all happening in the Omeo League. It's such a fascinating small competition. So I love hearing about that. Pete, I want to go for my final what caught my eye to the North Central League. Now, we've had a lot of great stories on this episode. We've had some funny stuff, we've had some intriguing stuff, we've had some great football and some great results. And I don't really want to bring the tone down a lot, but we did notice in our fairly typical weekly roundup of the scores on a Saturday evening after the Uni Blacks game that things were a little bit dire up in the North Central League. And by dire, I mean margins, winning margins are so big up there consistently. Now, I wish I'd had a little bit more time to put together some more numbers in terms of
Mm,
average winning margins across the season.
mm,
But what I can do is take you through the weekend's results, which saw Calder United Lions defeat Donald by 208 points. Birchip Watcham defeat Charlton by 171 points. Bort defeated St Arnaud by 91 points. And in the close game of the round, Wedderburn got up over, no, sorry, Sea Lake Nandaly got up over Wedderburn by 65 points. So the very close margin of almost 11 goals there at Sea Lake. Now, it's not completely unprecedented to have a round of large scores, especially in some of these country leagues. There is a disparity between the top and bottom sides, but I'm noticing a pattern in this league. The margins are really big. The top sides defeat the bottom sides by 200 plus, and the top sides defeat the middle tier sides by around 100 points. There's no situation like the Hampden League going on here or the Ovens and Murray where a team can bob up from seventh on the ladder and defeat the reigning defeat the reigning premier, defeat the undefeated. It's a bit of a challenge up here, and I think it's a bit of a concern for the health of that league. We know there's huge distances between those towns up there, and real challenges with the number of players that are available to go around for those small communities. So, don't really know what's going to happen in the future there. We just hope that some of those clubs that have been struggling for many, many years, like Donald and St Arnaud, can start to build a bit of a squad, can start to recruit a little bit better and even up that league. But at the moment, I would say it's one of the ones that catches my eye most for the biggest margins. I did have a look at the ladder, which shows Donald on the bottom without a win. St Arnaud a second bottom on 2 wins, both against Donald. Charlton third bottom on 4 wins, all against Donald and St Arnaud. So
mm.
those bottom three sides are only able to beat each other. Um, well, not even beat each other because Donald's so far out the back that they're
Yep.
not even beating the second, not even getting close to the second bottom side. Birchip Watcham are clear on top at 15 and zip with a percentage of 320. Second place is Calder United Lions, who have lost only to Birchip Watcham and also to the third place Sea Lake very early on in the season. So it's a pretty foregone conclusion already what the final structure will be there, and I would suggest it's pretty unlikely that Birchip Watcham will be defeated this season based on how results have gone. So again, not really sure what's going to happen or what
Mm.
the outcomes will be there, but just a bit of a watch on the North Central League given the
Yep.
continued size of those margins.
I think the two things I'd say about the North Central League, and this could be wildly inaccurate, so I'll say allegedly before I say this, but I reckon it's for me, I it's probably one of the most cashed up leagues in Victoria. I reckon.
Mm,
I reckon there's a lot of cash flowing around North Central. And I'm not saying like under the table cash, but I think a lot of those clubs have money to spend, and I think they spend it. Um, the second thing I would say is I wonder how much of that being cashed up and being able to spend the money is off the back of farming seasons.
mm,
And so I also wonder whether, does like a Donald or a Charlton or a St. Arnaud struggle based off how their farming seasons have been going, compared to a Birchip and a Sea Lake or a Nandalia, or a Bort. I don't know. That's just some musings I've got. Um, Donald, I did see have made finals the last couple, maybe 2 3 years. So they finished on 38 points, I think, last year. So it seems like the bottom's fallen out a little bit there for them this season. You were sort of talking about, you wish you had a little bit more time to do what the average losing margin was. Don't even know if you really need to do the average losing margin, in terms of you probably just either look at percentage or go across and go, Birchip Watcham have scored 2,069 points, Calder United 1,874, Sea Lake Nandaly 1,817, Bort 1,539, Wedderburn 1,355, Charlton 537, St Arnaud 640, Donald 288. So
Mm,
it sort of starts here, goes down to here, goes to here, and then falls off a cliff.
mm.
Um, so yeah, some interesting elements there in the North Central League. So it'll be good to keep an eye on that and see what happens. But yeah, I'm not as worried around that league. I don't know what's the recent history has been, but I feel like that is a league that, again, I'm just speculating here, but maybe off the back of good farming periods for different areas, that there's been some success. I know Wedderburn back in like the mid to early, or maybe mid 2010s, early 2010s. I think they won four in a row back in the day. They were really dominant back then, and I know that, I think Donald and Charlton and St Arnaud might have won some in the 2000s, late 2000s, 2007, 2008. So yeah, but it's a good watch, I reckon, because those margins were quite concerning, and those percentages are quite concerning, when you look at it for this season. So maybe a bit of a, wait and see for what happens in 2026.
I'd be surprised if the farming season is booming in Birchip but struggling in St Arnaud. I mean, they're not that far apart. But it's an interesting point. It's probably uh, down to different individual benefactors and donors. I think it's a real pity that the margins and the results are so dependent on the cash flow. But I suspect that you're very right. Yes, especially in that part of the world.
Yeah, definitely. But I think, Rob, probably a good little segue into looking at our paddock to premiership again. And we've got a couple of weeks that we can update on, or potentially just 1 week. You might have some clubs that you don't want to update 2 weeks of results on, but I might kick us off, Rob, and go to Castlemaine, another split round in the Bendigo Footy Netball League, because when you're bleeding teams, you need to try and make the season last as long as possible, which means you need to have about 8 split rounds. Um, so Castlemaine didn't play on the weekend, but they did play 2 weeks ago. Lost to Strathfield, say, by 41 points. Hey, still a league that's got a finals team below a 50% win rate. They play South Bendigo at the camp. Let's move on.
Okay, let's move on. Very good, or not very good if you're Castlemaine. Pyramid Hill going quite well. They had a 118-point win over Calival United and a 93-point win to finish off the season there in the Loddon Valley League. Uh, Very impressive end to the season there for Pyramid Hill after a little bit of a shaky period there for a while, but they did have a good last couple of weeks and they've slotted in third, Pete. So end of the season there, they will play finals. My understanding is it is a final five.
Yep.
So second playing third. Now, unfortunately, because second's playing third, they will have to play Bridgewater in the first
Mm,
final, and Bridgewater have been on a roll, as we've mentioned a few times.
they have been.
So, look, the rubber's really going to hit the road here, but I believe that the loser of that game will get a double chance. That's how the final five system works, I think. And the winner will automatically go through to the prelim final against Morong. But in any case, uh, still a good chance there for Pyramid Hill to progress,
Mm,
but a tough game coming up against a red-hot Bridgewater with a newly crowned 100-goal kicker
yeah.
in Lockie Sharp.
Yep, that'll be a good one to watch, I reckon, to see what Pyramid Hill can do against the Mean Machine in Bridgewater. The Hoppers, Rob, North Albury, Ovens and Murray. Huge win 2 weeks ago. In our last paddock to Premiership, I mentioned that the Hoppers had been on a bit of just that momentum had somewhat, got a bit dodgy. Is about
Plateaued.
the plateaued is probably a good word. I was trying to find a nice word for it other than just saying that the Hoppers had been going a bit shit. So they had a big one 2 weeks ago against the Wang Magpies, which really would have indicated whether they were going to be comfortable in finals or if they were going to have to scrap for that fifth spot for the rest of the season. They had a 23-point win against the Wang Magpies, piled on a lot of goals late, which was great. The Joshua twins, three to Minogue, two to Murphy. So the Twin Towers are back. They're causing plenty of havoc. And they did so again in a big 50-point win against Yarrawonga on the weekend. Those Joshua twins again, five to Murphy, three to Minogue. So they are really starting to get going, and you can imagine that opposition teams, come finals time, are putting a bit of work into what they need to do to stop the Joshua twins. They play Corowit this weekend, which is another great opportunity for the Joshua twins to kick a bag and keep that hopper machine rolling on.
Yep, they sound like they're winding up nicely and getting players back at the end of the season, so that's a good sign for the Hoppers. Down to the Vaffa Pete B grade, I'll give you Fitzroy. Um, Look, they won 2 weeks ago. Uh, they they had their second win for the season. Once again, unfortunately for Hampton, it was against Hampton. Bottom placed Hampton Rovers there are still winless in VAFA B grade. Fitzroy got the job done by 66 points. It's pretty big margin between second bottom and bottom. And
Mm.
look, Fitzroy have had some close margins against top sides, and they've clearly been better than the bottom place side, but they just have not won enough and they will be relegated, as we've said. It is now mathematically impossible for them to come even close to not being relegated, I would think.
Yeah.
On the weekend, they lost to Old Ivanhoe by 79 points. Old Ivanhoe sitting pretty on top of the ladder, and that is a statement win by Old Ivanhoe, even though Fitzroy are really struggling.
Yeah.
The good sides put the bottom sides away and boost their percentage, which is exactly what Old Ivanhoe did. So
Mm.
Fitzroy have uh, not really an easy run coming up. They've got Trinity next week, who are second. They've got Old Carey, who are doing quite well, and Old Melburnians, who, well, they're still just in the hunt for finals. So, no, Fitzroy, not going to be a fun last month in B grade.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a tough month for Fitzroy, and then maybe a tougher 6 months of a bit of soul searching of what went
Mm.
wrong for the season as they prepare to play in Prem C next year. Buck Manangatang, we don't need to go into this too much given your great coverage of the Central Murray League, but 2 weeks ago they defeated Kerrang by 44 points and then followed that up with a big 139-point win over Swan Hill on the weekend. 8 goals to Ethan Johnston, 7 goals to Connor Nutting, and 6 goals to Joshua Williams. So the rest were individual goal kickers. So they had three guys that stood up and kicked a lot. As we've mentioned, huge one this week against Kundrook Barham. Fifth v6, massive for finals. If Buck can get that win, then they put themselves in a commanding position to potentially get that final spot.
Mm. The name Connor Nutting is very familiar.
It is,
I've
isn't it?
I've Googled him. Apparently Gold Coast Academy player, but played a bit of AFL juniors for
Yep,
Gold Coast. But yeah, I feel like that's maybe there's another similar name that I'm trying to think of.
maybe.
Okay, Kringle down in the Mornington Peninsula League. 2. They went down to Bond Beach by 44 points on the weekend. Tough one there for Karingal, and the week before that, they lost by a similar margin to Chelsea. Chelsea are a fair bit higher on the ladder. So, look, Karingal do seem to have gathered a little bit of momentum late in the season and maybe got some players back and so forth. So, only one win on the board. It's their last game of the year this season, Pete, and they've
Yep.
got Rye. Rye are in eighth position with 3 or 4 wins. I can't remember. Um, Look, given the momentum Karingal have been gathering, maybe it's a chance. I wouldn't write them off to finish the year on a high. Obviously, been a tough one overall for the Bulls, but yeah, I'll be cheering them on against Rye Demons this weekend.
Let's hope they can finish off the year with another win and have another big celebration. The Monash Blues, Rob, it was touch and go. They needed a statement game to say that we will be here in Div 1 next season. We won't be doing the triple drop relegation and that we're going to right and steady the ship. That was, you know, 2 weeks ago playing against Brunswick, team middle of the table, the statement game they needed, and they got it. A 76-point win that stamped their authority and said that we will not be going anywhere other than Div 1 in 2026, including losses to Therapanola and Alstonwick. It now gives them another boost up the ladder above those two teams. It puts them 2 wins above both of those sides, plus a decent percentage. You almost very close to saying mathematically it's a challenge for either of those two sides to get over the top. Not completely though. We know that football's a weird game. Um, Unfortunately, this weekend, with the opportunity to put themselves mathematically safe, they had a really poor game against UHSVU. They lost convincingly. The only silver lining being that Therapanola and Alstonwick also lost, so they keep that 2 game buffer. Um, this is the weekend, Rob, upcoming to put it out of doubt, to put no hesitancy or doubt into the minds of the Monash supporters. They play bottom of the ladder, Alstonwick. They can win that and put themselves safe with only one game remaining after that. And then they are home and hosed. So another big week for Monash, but that win against Brunswick looks like it might have seen them home.
Yeah, that was definitely a big win, percentage boost, and the 4 points.
Yeah.
So very good there for Monash and Elstonwick. Well, they're coming off a 170 odd point loss to Old Peninsula. So hopefully Monash can get the chocolates there. All right, last one. Staying in the VAFA, Old Trinity had a 19-point win over Old Geelong on the weekend. And let me just find the result prior to that. The result prior to that was a 9-point win over Old Melburnians. So a couple of reasonably close games there. I guess fairly comfortable over Old Melburnians. That keeps the OTs firmly in the top two. Quite comfortably in the top two now. 2 games clear of Caulfield in third and 3 games clear of Williamstown in fourth. So if my maths is right, they will be playing finals. They can't fall out of the top four. Old Trinity, great result for them. They're still a game behind Old Ivanhoe, who put their stamp on things over Fitzroy, as I mentioned earlier. But the top four is getting a little more. Well, the top three is getting settled.
Mm.
But the top four, maybe not so much. There's still Williamstown, Old Camberwell, Old Carey, and Old Geelong on 32 points.
Yeah.
So that remains a lion's den down there for that remaining final four spot. Old Ivanhoe continue to impress though. Trinity snapping at their heels. Given the competitiveness and the evenness of the rest of the competition, you'd have to say it's firming up to be Old Trinity and Old Ivanhoe for promotion. But there have been some funny results in this league.
Yep.
It's not over till it's over. And there are a few teams like Old Carey and Old Camberwell who, on their day, will feel like they can knock off anyone. So, very intriguing. But at the moment, Old Trinity are going along quite well. Just their final two games are against Old Ivanhoe this weekend. No, that's sorry, Fitzroy this weekend.
Hmm.
Then Old Ivanhoe, top of the table clash,
Big one.
which will be pretty epic. And the final game will be against Caulfield. So they play two of the current top four sides, other than themselves, obviously, in the run home, and Fitzroy, who they will be expecting to get a big win over this coming week. So there we have it. Lots of variety in the Paddock to Premiership, lots of different circumstances. Some clubs finishing up, and some clubs very much pushing on into finals. So that's, I think, pretty much all we've got for this week for you. We hope that you have a great week in local footy. If your team is starting to play finals, good luck. If your team is pushing into finals, good luck. If your team is finishing up, I hope your Mad Monday goes well. And otherwise, we hope that your team in those last few weeks of the season will get the 4 points and go out of the season on a high. We will see you next week.